Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is episode 40 of Inspiring Insights. So glad to see you all here tonight. Jared, Conastantu, Gunamahagat, Ishmisha, Erin Edwards. Hello and good day. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. My name is Erin Edwards. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. This is episode 40 of Inspiring Insights. And because this is also, the quote unquote Pride Month, the 1 month where I get to celebrate myself in unending glee and maybe unabashedly, without any guilt, perhaps. I'm coming to you from my own hot seat tonight and going to be sharing a little bit more about my own story and hoping that this is a way for all of you folks to get a chance to know me a little bit more. So, every now and again, I think I did this back on episode 25 as well. I hop on here and kind of lead one of these episodes by myself. It's not often, but it does happen. And so I hope this episode is very valuable for you in a way that it allows you to connect with me a bit more. And thank you for showing up here tonight live as I share parts of my story. And I know I am unique. Unfortunately, there are many fears that live in my story that I think run on very similar threads in a lot of other folks in the queer community as well in their story. And they, of course, have their own story to tell, but I'm happy to share parts of me and parts of mine tonight. So first of all, why is it important that queer folks share their story? And I want to get into that. Maybe let me just give you my main introduction again, which is, I always introduce myself as an uprooted Newfoundlander. I was born in the easternmost province of Canada. I have Irish and Welsh descendants, and they call it the Rock. It's totally exactly what you're thinking. It's a cold, rocky place out in the middle of the Atlantic. Mixed with, the tundra and the forests and the Canadian Shield. Originally the land of the Beothuk, also Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit people still are living in Newfoundland and Labrador today. And both my parents were teachers, and I thank them so much for stepping into their own power as teachers, because I have been teaching myself so much. And I think there's this funny thing about when you step into your own power and step into your own gifts as a teacher, whatever that looks like, an educator, healthcare provider, manager, anything, there is a certain sense of, you look back on your own life and you think about all the people who have done great things for you, and so I hold my parents very dear, and thanking them for sure. And they're an integral part of my story, and I think I held a lot of anger toward them for a long time, most of my life, to be honest. And I think that kind of stemmed from Christianity and maybe the place that I lived in and being from a very small town and all that too. But anyway, more on that later. I digress. So I am a mindfulness teacher now. I offer soul coaching. Physically, I actually don't live in Newfoundland anymore. I take up space in Takaronto, or Toronto, as most people know it. This area around the Great Lakes was included in the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Treaty, and just wanting to give a little shout out to all the nations that have cared for this land and are still caring for this land, including the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And I know that I'm a newcomer and a settler here. I have been invited to lift this one spoon with all of you folks, all other nations who live here, in respectful collaboration and in honor of where we live and work and play. And I invite you as well, all of you folks out there, to think about the land that you're on, maybe honor that with the actual names of the folks that have been living there for a very long time, a lot longer than a lot of us, our families have even been here as settlers. And I also ask you to think about tonight all of the ways in which we can make the lands more feminist and maybe more queer as well, because there is a link between all of these things, and I'm hoping to touch on that in a little bit later. So how can we make those things that we do and we be, including our language, including our careers, including the way we speak, including the ways we think, including the structures that we climb or that we construct for ourselves, the healthcare world, the mindfulness world, spirituality world, what we think about healing and who gives it and how do we get it and where do we get it from. All those things are very important, especially for this time in our world right now. We're in a very interesting time, and we have all come here to be here right now. We are special in that way. And in a way, there's really nothing special about us. People have come here from time immemorial, and it's always been in transition. So we're going to touch on that too, but I wanted to kind of point out that, this sense of healing and this sense of who are we when we are healing, or who are we not when we're not healed? What does that mean to be alive? What does that mean to be, like, are we zombies? What is that? And it's something that I spoke to strongly in my book, A Drink Called Mindfulness. And so the title is A Drink Called Mindfulness, but one of the subtitles that I was playing with, and I didn't end up going with this, had something to do with like walking out of the zombie apocalypse into like a mindful world. Because for a long time I was there. I was a zombie, and I felt that I was just living in this, like I wasn't living. I was just a zombie walking around doing this thing that I thought that I could step into. And then when I actually found the thing that I could step into, that's, I think, when I fully came more alive and was able to tap into my roots. Having said that, my roots, not just my own family traditions and lineage, but the stuff, the nitty gritty stuff, this chrysalis that we go into as a caterpillar, and we come out as a beautiful butterfly on the other side. This sense of like taking off against the wind almost. You need a little push, and you need to also flow into it. So how do we do that in ways that are a little bit more fluid and encourage ourselves to be okay and not to hold binaries as much as we do right now in the world, or as much as our society wants us to? So those are some things that I am inviting you to think about as I speak. And I'm going to share a few things tonight. I want to share a poem for sure. You know what? You can't get me without me having to share a poem lately. I'm really tapping into this creative side of me, and this sense of doing this healing work, this decolonization, this querying of ourselves. What does that look like? How do we examine our own implicit bias, and how do we shed the oppressions that have lived in our bodies, lived in our generations, lived in our mothers and our fathers and our grandfathers and the fathers and parents and mothers before them, and all the folks. So please do comment as I go along. I also want this to be more of a conversation. So Bunny, I know you're out in the audience there. I will probably call on you at some points to give some feedback, or give some, just some way to bounce ideas off of, because I think it's important to have these discussions, not just from a soapbox, actually get down in there and just talk it out. And I know we in particular maybe have a similar background
Yes.
in that we're both non-binary, but maybe that's even better, for the folks out there who are listening who want to do better at decolonizing their own gender and becoming more of an ally.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So as I said before, yes, I'm a mindfulness teacher. Yes, I'm non-binary. Yes, I've written a book. It's called The Drink Called Mindfulness. It's on Amazon. It's on my own website. You can go grab that. I'm trained in a lot of different things. And I think my experience being queer, and I want to get into that too, coming out as a teenager, really has enabled me to be able to code switch a lot better. I don't know if that's a skill at this point. I think so. And to be able to speak different languages, to be able to present myself in different ways, almost as a shapeshifter in different scenarios. And that's helped me in different jobs, in interviews, networking with folks, getting clients, everything. There's so many different languages that we can speak. And I think the more that we speak those languages and practice those languages and step into those, and I'm not just actually talking of like, I'm not talking different languages. I'm talking like, how do we speak the medicines of ourselves and of the place that we come from? So for me, I grew up in Newfoundland, but I didn't know really any of the kind of old wives' tales that had been passed down, from generations, from Ireland and from Wales of my ancestry. But now that I'm learning more, I see them so connected into what I did formerly, which was study exercise physiology for one, the study of human movement and how the body works in space and how it functions. And that as well has led me into this mindfulness space, this kind of how do we sit in introspection and be able to viscero perceive ourselves and our organs in our body and everything that's going on around us, and this proprioception of our limbs and our nose sucking in air, everything. It's all related, which I love. And so these are the languages that I'm speaking of. After exercise physiology and kinesiology, I studied naturopathic medicine because I was along the path of wanting to dive deeper for my clients into the things that were really, that they were really trying to overcome. And for the most part, I was working with clients who were in high stress jobs and would come to a high stress gym environment and do the same, kind of 110% workout, high intensity interval training. And they wanted to see results. And it was for them all about results all the time, outcome oriented. And as someone who was looking on from the bleachers almost, being like the coach and the parent at the same time, saying like, yeah, go do it, I found that there was a lot of other things that were impacting our lives. And that's what brought me to naturopathic medicine. Not only the food that we eat, but how stress impacts our bodies and our hormones. And as people who may be assigned as female at birth or assigned male at birth, how does that play into our identity at this point in time? And I'm just really, really realizing this now, that the medical world and even the exercise world, the science world in general, is quite binary. It focuses really, it wants to categorize. It's left-brained. And I think these systems aren't necessarily bad, but they're a shortcut. And I don't really like calling it a shortcut either, but they're a way to kind of make immediate connections. And it's more of a causal connection than an actual direct connection. So sometimes we forget that. And sometimes we want to know exactly the BMI that's associated with a woman who is 40 and where she needs to be instead. And all of these diet regimens and everything else that can come out of that. And then there's this other piece of like, oh, this woman is actually not a woman. And is their biology changing that? Is their social and lived experience changing that? And how do we speak to people and talk to them and understand them in ways that are outside of the ways that we've learned, you know? And for that was a really big thing for me. I'm just starting to kind of shed the biases that are in science. And I've always been more of like an artsy thinking kind of person, philosophical kind of person, but there is this kind of tendency for society in general to want to know science and the science behind this and the science behind that and their research and the proven yada, yada, yada. And yeah, there's a place for that. And there's also, I think, a place for this other side of things. And there's also, they all live in together, you know? So I'm going to talk a lot about, you'll probably get sick of me saying these things, but really holding all the truths at once. So when you see one side of thing, you know, when you're angry, you see this thing. And then you have to know what anger is like to know what it's not like, right? So you go over here and you're like, oh, yesterday I was angry. Today I'm happy. And today, if you're happy, you're really leaning into the happy. You know, you're really enjoying it and you're associating whatever it is. Maybe it's the weather, maybe it's things that happen in your life with happiness. But then the next day, again, you go back to anger. And so you stretch. The more you stretch, and it's not none of these emotions are bad. Okay. You just hold them. You hold them in your experience. And sometimes some of us are talking about finding this balance. How do I find balance, Erin? That's what a lot of my clients ask me all the time. How do I find balance? How can my chakras be aligned to find balance, to find peace? And so there's like this notion of like, I don't like being on the edges. I don't like being out here. I want to be here because that's like me being more peaceful and being more calm, being able to like, you know, love my wife or whatever it is and be able to be in relationship with ourselves too. And I think being able to hold all that truth together and being able to really be in your anger and being really able to be in your happiness, in doing that and leaning all the way in, we find balance. You don't have to find balance by doing. You just find it by being in it. So again, we're destroying this notion of like doing this kind of, and because I'm trained in traditional Chinese medicine, this more yang aspect of the world is like that we have to intervene to do something, that we have to like figure it out before it's already figured out. You have to, you know, graduate elementary school and then you go to junior high school. And then once you're done junior high, you go to high school. And then when you're done that, you go to university. And then when you're done university, you go get a job, you get married. And then when you're married, you know, work for X amount of years and then you retire. And then you retire and there's something else. What is it? We're always running. So being really able to just lean into this. And I think it's all connected. It's all connected to our abilities to look at the structures of our society and how we function here. And for me, being rooted in my own Celtic traditions and learning more about the oracle of the Ogham, which is like the tree, alphabet, and just being more connected to nature in general and the cycles of nature and the seasonals and the fire festivals of the Celtic calendar and all of that really helps me lean into, and it allows me to not want to do so much and to just be. And I firmly believe that mindfulness is the key to opening the gate of your own spirituality. You know, some of us say that we're not spiritual, and that's totally fine. Maybe not religious, but maybe spiritual. A lot of people say that. What is spirituality to me? I think spirituality for me is just being able to embody our roots, whatever that looks like. And again, we lean into it. We don't go anywhere else. We don't have to be anybody else. We don't have to accept the lies that consumerism tells us, that you lack anything. You're able to just be who you are. And being who you are changes our mindset from a place of surviving to thriving, changes our mindset from a place of lack to abundance, that there is enough for me, that I can take enough space up in the world. I think for me, being queer, as a young teenager, all I wanted to do was hide, because I was told that it was wrong on so many levels. It was wrong in my parents' eyes. It was wrong in my community's eyes. It was wrong in my church's eyes, in my God's eyes, in my own God's eyes. I was wrong. And I swallowed that down as a teenager, a 13-year-old. I swallowed it. I said, oh, I'm wrong. There must be something inherently wrong with me. There must be something bad about me. This place that I want to lean into, oh, I shouldn't. So that's just the beginning. There's a lot of things I want to talk about today, and I'm going to try to keep myself on track here, but who I am today versus who I was, oh my goodness, I don't even remember. Good thing I do write poetry and some stories myself, because I look back on these things and I'm like, oh my goodness, like like when I'm reading my diary from younger years, even like last year, 2 years ago. And it's nice to look at that, because you get to see this piece of you that you for sure thought you were, at one point. And you get to really step into that. And then reading it from a point in the future, you see it, and from that point in the future, you say, oh, I was really that person at that point. And it's not even that long ago, and I'm so changed. So then you can look ahead and say, oh, okay, I'm really this person who I am right now, and I am okay, and I am dynamic, and it's okay for me to shift and be more open-minded and change. Even though I was this way for 15 years, maybe I can be this way now. And you start to trickle into that sense of transition. So that is, to me, what I think being proud means, what having pride in yourself is. It's a sense of this rootedness, being rooted in your own story. And in the same breath, knowing that the world is still turning. I love trees, and I'll use this example. This one day I was out just walking down the street, and it had rained in the morning, but was sunny at that point. And so I was looking at this tree, and the tree bark was wet. And then as the sun was rising, I could see the part of the bark that was drying off. And so on one side, the tree looked totally different from one side to the other. It was totally different. It was like wet and moist. There was all kinds of different bugs on one side. The leaves looked different in the different light. It was a bit shady over there. And then you turn around and it's another sort of gorgeous. There's dry bark, and there's caterpillars, and there's, leaves that dance in the wind a different way. And so this is the same tree I'm looking at, but just from two different perspectives. So I always think like that. I'm like, what's on the other side of the tree here? Always. I'm always thinking of, okay, what's on the other side here? And I think, again, going back to the nature-based kind of mindfulness, being rooted in nature, we get a chance to do that every day. The sun rises and the sun sets. we are in a lot of ways able, or at least reminded of, maybe we're not able yet, we're reminded to let go every day, that the sun sets and it will come out again. The light will come. You just have to go through this night. And we so forget that. We so forget that. So the times that we're in now, apparently, astronomically, astrologically, we are in this planetary shift, this intergalactic movement of things. And I don't know a lot about the stars or about constellations, but I'll try to put this in my best understanding of what I do know. And what I do understand is transitions. I've moved over 15 times in my young life. I'm turning 30 this year, by the way, so it's on the average every 2 years. But it's been probably more than that, or what seems like more than that. And for a while, I thought that was a way to look back and look forward. It's like, oh, I lived here at one point, now I'm going to be living there. And it was a constant shifting, moving, always. Which in a way, sometimes you can't help, right? But that contributed to my dualistic thinking. Sometimes it's kind of spoken of this, like there's two halves, but they're also within each other, two sides of the same coin. The bigger circle of life. And that bigger circle of life is in itself multidimensional. It's literally larger than life. Maybe more than we can even intellectually understand. And so we're in this transition period now. We stepped into 2020 and the world got a chance to have some hindsight, to look back. And we see this patriarchal structure that I think kept us subservient in so many ways. You don't have to be queer to get this. I'm just thinking of my previous friend, my roommate, that he traveled over an hour and a half every day to go to work. And in a way that was his time commitment. That was his subservience in a system that didn't serve most of, his life. When he actually got a chance to work from home, he became so connected back to himself because he wasn't spending 3 hours on the highway all day. Hour and a half one way, hour and a half the other way, So we get to see this structure that we're in. And looking forward, I'm not keen on swinging this structure all the way one way from, like, say we're here, okay, we're in this like patriarchy. And I think at Turtle Island in Canada, we've come a long way, not gonna lie, but there's still so much to go. Sometimes we become complacent and we think, oh yeah, like everybody's good here, like people are friendly here, queers get to hold hands with each other here. But it's not the case in every single place in Canada, even in terms of rural versus urban places. So when I came out when I was 13, I was in this small town in Newfoundland, in the middle of nowhere. Okay, it's like 4 hours from the main city, and the main city only has 500,000 people in it. No, sorry, 250,000 people. 500,000 is the whole province of Newfoundland and Labrador. So 500,000. And most of those people are centered around the urban city there, St. John's. So I'm about 4 hours away from there. And I'm this young 13-year-old, have no idea who I am, have I mean, at the time, probably thought I had a pretty good idea. I was an athlete. I was mostly just an athlete, to be honest. Pretty big jock. And when I started having feelings for a friend, more than just feelings, they're more than just like, oh, I want to be, like, I want her to hold my hand in a way that was more than just like, oh, like a friendly handhold. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, am I gay? And then that word couldn't even come out of my mouth. I couldn't even say the word lesbian. It was like too much for me. And so I came out to one of my best friends who is coincidentally now bisexual, has come out as bisexual, who I only found out like a couple of years ago. And he was so amazing about it. He was like, Erin, that's incredible. Like, you go do you. You're amazing. Like, now you can like make friends and possibly more. Who knows? And that was beautiful. And I don't want to dwell too much on the sad kind of scarred heart part of it, part of it all. But my religion, and I was pretty, like, my family's pretty devout Roman Catholic. The religion that I had been going to, and I hadn't really questioned it all up until this point, all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm wrong in this. The Bible tells me I'm wrong. And so I kept that in. I kept it in for another 5 years. I didn't tell my parents. I told my friends, most of my friends knew. But I kept it in from my parents till I was 18. So basically my whole high school plus 2 years was me living like a secret life, but not really. Like me constructing myself this story for me that wasn't me. And I remember not even having the guts to come out to my parents. I wrote it to them in an email. Thank God for email, like in this world of technology. I wrote it to them in an email. And I remember that morning so clearly. My parents had no idea what to do. I didn't want to get out of bed. I knew that they were going to read it in the morning. So I sent it the night before. And it was hard. And I'm thanking my oldest sibling for being there for my parents, because they didn't have anything to base it off of. They didn't even have the internet for most of their lives, so they couldn't Google or Yahoo or Ask Jeeves at the time. What was it like to be gay? They wouldn't even have thought that way. Whereas, I'm like 18, I'm like developing this sense of self for the past 5 years at least in terms of my sexual orientation. And so that wasn't easy, and it was kind of rough. My mother, and I love you, Mom, love you. I remember this. She brought me to my doctor and said, is there some sort of like brain scan you could do? Is there anything you can do, doctor? I think Erin is sick, or there's something wrong. And this is just what, she didn't know any better. And so I held this over my mom's head for 10 years. I read the book, It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen. Very good read, all about intergenerational trauma. Highly recommend. And it has some exercises in it. So I confronted my mom. I said, remember that time that you brought me to the doctor's office and said this when I was 18? This thing that I had been angry at her for 10 years about, she didn't even remember. She didn't even remember. And I think in a large part, in a big way, my coming out was really, it upended her identity. And so she was not clear on how to do that work herself. By then she was in her 50s. And she's done a lot of work since then. But it was so, I only just realized this when I was 28. This is like less than a year ago. I was like, okay, Mom, do you remember this? And she's like, why are you bringing up the past? And then I told her, and I'm like, I need to talk to you about this. Like, this is upsetting to me. And she said, I don't even remember that. I'm so sorry. Like, I was dealing with my own shit, So these are the things that happen when you're young and you come out. By the way, I had come out when I was 18 because I was terrified. When I already lived apart from my parents, I was terrified of being under their control and either being kicked out or being really strict on me. So I waited. And I tried very hard to be a regular human being, a normal, quote unquote, person. I had like a 97 average in high school. And I'm like, where's the other 3%? That's what I was thinking. And so these are like the aspirations that were set up for me. I didn't know that I was taking them in. It just happened that way. So I just tried to be a regular human. And then I realized now that I am a regular human, but in the same breath, like very extraordinary, So that's a big part of coming back to this, okay, the patriarchy that we've been born into, that automatically sets some people behind or apart and literally makes them live in fear. I don't know if this transition into what the new world will look like, I don't know if it's super beneficial for us to go all the way the other way. Because what I see and what I'm envisioning is making and creating something entirely new from scratch. And that can only unfold without intervention. Again. So this broader ability for us to see and to look back and to say, wow, I'm going to listen to the stories of others. I'm going to hear them out. And I'm going to hold that with all the privilege that I've had and with all the privilege that you're listening to this with. And then you're going to also see, oh, this world is, if you're straight or if you're white or if you're cisgender, this world was really built for you. And so fast forward to just this past year, and this is pretty new for me. I'm non-binary and really challenging the gender norms that I hold and the transphobia that I have given to me probably by movies and Hollywood. What else is there? Because there's not really any literature that I was reading when I was younger that was super trans friendly or non-binary friendly or gender non-conforming friendly. So fast forward to now, and I did this program with Echo Alec, and I have a huge shout out for Echo. She's doing so much good work, in her own community, and also so much good work in communities to help understand decolonization and indigenous wisdom. And so Echo, thank you for leading Rooted in Your Story, which if I had not done, and if I had not been in a place to sit an hour a week with folks from around the world on a Zoom class and to dive really deep and to understand my own roots, I don't know if I would have been able to even see and deconstruct my gender in the way that I did. So thank you for that, Echo. I have talked a lot. It's already been maybe 40 minutes. Wow. I thought this would go a lot slower than it did. I want to share a poem, and it is a bit rough. Content warning. There's some like stuff about sex. There's stuff about being gay. There's that kind of stuff. How are we all feeling? We're ready for a little poem?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I wrote this just a couple days ago, and I was thinking about who I am. And I answered the question, who am I? And I'm always asking this question and answering it and trying to remain dynamic and fluid in it. So who am I? For a moment, my scarred heart wants to darken, to turn and blame the 13-year-old me, to blame her for beginning this journey, to stay mad at all those people who made me mad when I said that I wanted to hold my friend's hand, who I wanted to be more than just a friend. Back then, I kept my voice small and my body smaller. A body that was already undergoing the changes of puberty and the judgments of others who deemed me too thin or too quiet or too resting bitch face or too gay to function. This body told me things that my Christian mind comprehended as sin. When at the smell of perfume or the eye contact of a teenage girl making my tummy flutter, I told myself that a fluttering tummy is a bad thing. It's a sin. And so I made myself nauseous every time I broke the 10 Commandments by making my crush laugh or by making my crush come. I did not know it, but I was trained to make myself feel small. It was the perfect coaching act for which now I can blame no one. No one thing made me who I am, and no one thing breaks who I am. I tried for so many years to hold myself back, but I realized myself is so much stronger than my ego. Myself is so much wiser than the patriarchal collective. My eyes were given sight to see beyond the binary, not a skill that is awarded to the many. Because the many don't undergo discrimination in an interview. The many don't hold such an invisible thing inside. The many don't know my sacred identity. That my expression holds more truth than your genes ever will. And I pray for a day that an 18-year-old doesn't have to wait until they're 18 to come out in fear of being kicked out onto the streets, where it's estimated that queers take up about 25% of this country's homeless population. I pray for the child born outside of the only 11 countries in the world that even mention sexual orientation in their constitution's non-discrimination clauses. I pray for the 28-year-old who was born just shy of the World Health Organization's declassifying homosexuality as a disease and still listens to their parents talking about bringing them to the doctor for a brain scan because they just might have something physically wrong with them. I pray for those in the 12 countries, members of the United Nations, by the way, who would sentence its civilians to death for homosexual activity, and the 69 more countries wherein consenting adults are still considered to be committing a crime when they say "I love you" to their same-sex partner. But it's just for a moment that my scarred heart darkens. The cracks in me let the light in, and I become Erin, unbound. This journey didn't start when I was 13. It started when the world breathed life into existence. And I allow the winds to fill my sails and use all that negativity to soar. And I know that my impact has only just begun. And I know that my chosen family has played a huge role in normalizing everything I internalized to be wrong. Rumi says, inside you there is an artist that you don't know about. I think the sight that we were given in 2020 is being able to see that artwork, to dust it off, to lean in and to show it. Put a queer person as part of that artwork. Just look and see and feel and hold them in your heart, because our work is far from over. Our work is far from over. So that is just one piece. And those statistics, I think, Pride YMM, which is the organization in Fort McMurray that's doing amazing things to teach the general public more about, the global oppression that queers still face, that trans people still face, and these intersections are only worse. The further out from the center of the wheel of social location that you are in. So this wheel can, picture white folks, cisgender folks, and by cisgender I mean people who act and express the way that they were assigned at birth. So someone who's assigned female acts and thinks and expresses themselves as a woman. So if you're cisgender, if you're white, if you're non-Indigenous in general, if you lean closer to masculinity, you're treated differently in society. I'm not sure I can talk after that. Yeah, Bunny. Thank you for listening. I know it was such a heart wrencher. I didn't know I was going to get so teary at this, but
it's really beautiful.
'Tis the way. Thank you, Bunny. I think it's so important to share our stories, and I don't even think I'm gonna get to the piece about how to make mindfulness more queer. I mean, maybe we can all take what the things that I've said and put them to use, and I'm more than open to discussion around this. I know that I am a bit closer to the circle, to that center, because of my white skin and because I speak English and because I'm able-bodied. I am, my proximity to power is closer than a lot of folks. And I am, thanking that I can even go on the subway here in Toronto with the pin that says they, them on my shirt. And I don't have to fear for my safety at any time of day, really, which is something I think dearly. And so I really like Eckhart Tolle. It's totally cliche, but I wanted to end with this quote, and it's something he says. He said, "The secret in life is to be able to die before you die." And I want to bring that back to the beginning of this conversation when we talked about being a zombie, going through this life, checking the boxes, checking maybe someone else's boxes, expectations for you. The secret in life is to be able to die before you die. What does that mean? It means you actually live. Do you lean so hard into death of a part of yourself? For some people, it's actually having a near-death experience. It's letting go that part of you that holds onto structure so hard. And in letting go of that, it allows you to experience what it's like to actually let go. And I love the practice of mindfulness for this reason, and I'm so drawn to it. I know this is my life's calling. And I 100% promise you that when you move into your own sense of self, when you find your own roots, and maybe it's just finding out, where your mom's from. I know for a lot of folks, it's not easy to find out the generations and generations past that. But being able to sit with who you are now. And maybe that's the message for Pride Month. This is also National Indigenous History Month.
I love that because there's such a freedom in that. There's a true freedom in sitting in who you are when you finally see, or you're finally able to see who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful thing. And I guess the freedom before we die is maybe being at peace with who we are. And dying before we die is just being at peace before we go. I think I'm not sure. Just my take on it.
Yes, thank you, Bunny. It's so real. I think in a lot of ways it is the ultimate paradox, and being again able to hold all of that. Yes, I'm going to die physically, but do I understand my actual life? Have I lived it? Who am I? And so many of our ancestors have not had a chance to do that. Again, we're in this time, this age. It's perfect. It's ripe. We stepped into it. We've been ripening. Our ancestors did what they had to do for us to get here.
Yes.
So being here, how can we really lean into that and let go of all the things that we're holding back and we're angry about for our ancestors and what they did and what they didn't do, and the society and the structures that we're in and what they did and what they didn't do for us? How can we find compassion in that? And that's flow, that's mindfulness, that's in its truest form.
I told my mom that I was breaking the cycle, and I will be the one to break the cycle, because she doesn't quite see it. I don't know that she wants to, and that's okay. That's her generation. That's her thing. But I told her that I am changing it, and she said, "I'm behind you," and I can't ask for more than that. So I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I'll take it.
Yeah, our parents are behind us, you know, in maybe good ways and bad. That's just it. That's the circle of life. I love that. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Bunny. Oh, that is the work, you know, 1 hour of preaching it looks a lot different from living it. So now how do we go out and do that? And we hold all that together and be in the now moment and give it all we got. It's tough. Any last words from you, Bunny, before I sign off for the evening?
I would just say that we do it with all the grace that we can muster.
With all the grace, we keep trying, don't we? It's amazing.
Thanks, Erin.
Of course, I had a lot of really great resources that I had collected for this chat, and you know, stuff that touches on intersectionality. Laverne Cox, who I love. Some other really great like national resources, mental health supports. Even just understanding your straight and cisgender privilege, those activities. I'm going to put all of that in the links. So for both the YouTube show and the podcast show, all those links will be in the show notes. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing and for subscribing. I am so happy to keep sharing, and I'm so happy to be able to share this on this podcast. Oh, and by the way, thank you, Rebecca Llewellyn, for supporting and sponsoring this episode. So this has been episode 40 of Inspiring Insights. Thank you. I love you. If you want to work with me after all of that, if something in there jived with you, please reach out. My email is hello@reawakenco.com. Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely evening.